In the series of supervised learning model, we have already seen the concept of classification and regression. Okay, so we have already learned the concept of classification and regression. Okay, so now let's recap these things. What is the actually main concept behind it? Let's recap it. So actually, we have a data set, and these data sets are look like this. They are have some independent variables that we call xi, and as well they are have some dependent variables corresponding to each independent variable, that's we call yi. Okay, and if the according to the data sets, these things are defined, it is a classifications problem or regressions problem. If already we have seen, if our data sets means in our data set, if the dependent variables means yi, if it's belong to some integer value, means suppose like that, if it is belongs to 0 1 1, means if our yi are lie, it either it is 0 or either it is 1. If this kind of dependent variable we have, then this kind of problem we call this means classifications. Here we have two type of variables for the dependent variable yi. So for these reasons we call this problem is a two class classification problem. Already we have seen this concept. These things we call two class classification problem. Okay, if the yi if the yi belongs to a real number, means if it has suppose let our the dependent variable yi, it's lie on 0 to 1. So not 0 or 1, suppose it's lie in 0 1, means it could be any value between 0 and 1. So it's 0 and it's 1, it could be any value between them. Okay, it could be any value anywhere, it could be like. So in such scenario we call this kind of problem is a regression problem. We call this problem is a regression problem. Okay, now the what is actual, just a thing, first thing that we have to remember, what is actual task in the supervised model. Our tasks that we have at the end of the day, we have to predict the what will be the we have to predict what will be the value for a given value. Suppose let we have a given value x, and for this value what will be the corresponding dependent value, means what will be the value of this y. That's the main task. Means our main task is we have to find the f, that f is predict the correct, means not means appropriate type of value corresponding to the yi. So here yi is what, just recap these things. Here yi is, here yi is dependent variable, dependent variable corresponding to the corresponding to the independent variable xi. That's the, in another language these yi are called the given output, means given output given output, or it's called the correct in given output, or it is the correct output, actual output of a system. That's the thing, that's the actual or yi. Now let's take, we are we have a point, we have a for a system. Now we have a query point. Suppose let's take we have a query point xq, that's we call a query point. That's things we call a query point. Now our main job, now in the field of classifications and aggregations, our main job is, for this query point we have to find the value of corresponding y. What will be the value? Suppose let's take, we have for this query point xq, we have to find a function f. Suppose let this function will give some output for this query point. Suppose let's take, we denoted these things are y hat for this point, and this y hat for this query point, these y hat are called the predicted output. This y hat actually called the predicted output corresponding to the corresponding to the query point xq. Okay, now we have the, our main job is that this yi, now we have job is that this yi and yi hat are equal or not. The main job is that. Okay, suppose now already we have seen this query point, we have this query point we have taken from the data set. This query point we have taken from this data set, and for building the model we have divide this data, we will divide this data in two part. Already this kind of thing we have seen in two part, training part, we have training part and test part. We have split this data set in two part. In generally we have taken the splitting for 60% for training data in typically, and 40% for test data. So to train after, and at the test phase of our model, the xq, the query point that we have taken from the test data set, this test data set. Okay, and for this test data set we have some output, actual output for this query point. Suppose let's take for this query point that we have taken from the test data set, we have this output yi, yq. Suppose let's take its corresponding output is yq, means it's the actual output for this query point, actual output. Okay, now our job here in the classifications, our job is we have to compare this yq and this, means the actual output and the predicted output. Now we have to compare if this actual output, that is yq, are equal to y hat or y hat. That's the condition that we have to check. If this one is yes, there have two output, it will be yes or no. There may have chance to get two kind of output. If this one is yes, then the model that we have built, f, is correct, then f is correct. Otherwise, if this one is no, if this things is no, then we have to retrain f, we have to retrain the f. We have to retrain the f. Okay, and up to when I no, up to when these conditions is not satisfied. Till now we have to retrain this model. So that's the main concept behind the supervised learning model, that we have seen this concept, and the task is here we have to predict. Task is here the main task that always we have to remember, to, to predict these functions, to predict this function. Okay, that's the main job, that's the main concept, main primary concept behind the classifications and regressions, means in the supervised learning model. That's the main primary concept. Now let's try to understand the concept of unsupervised learning model. Okay, so there have various kind of unsupervised learning model. So in this series we will discuss the clustering technique. This is one kind of unsupervised learning model technique. Okay, now let's try to understand this concept. Means in the unsupervised learning model, first technique that we will going to discuss, the clustering technique. The clustering technique. Now let's try to understand what is the differences between the clustering and this regression model. Let's try to understand. So the first thing that we have to understand, the data set that we have. So here the data, in the data sets we have two type of data, means independent type, and corresponding to the independent type we have some actual output. But the main difference here is that in this unsupervised model, the data sets we have only independent variable, only independent, means the corresponding to the independent variable, what will be the output, that kind of things here we have not. Okay, so here we have only independent output, there have no any yi's, there have no any yi's. Okay, that's the first thing. Now the main thing, that because we have no any yi's, so how we will train this kind, or how we will find if we predict some value in how will justify these things, this predicted value are actually accurate or not. So in such situations, what we have to do? So the task is the main task that have to understand that. So the task here is that we have to understand. The task is we have to find the group or cluster between the similar point of this point. That is the main task here. The task that first always to first. So the task is here we have to find the group. We have to group or cluster. Same meaning, group or cluster, as you call. We have to find the group or cluster between the similar kind of point, between the main, that we have to understand. Similar, what is similar? Similar data points. Okay, similar. Now we have to understand these things. What is similar here? Sure. Data points means I am talking this xi is data point. This xi, I am talking about this. This is the data point. Don't be confused about this terminology. These are the data points. Okay, here is also, these are the data points here. Actually, I have used the mathematics term dependent variables, independent variables, but actually, if you just see these things in practically, these are the data points. That's things already we have seen. Okay, these are the data points. That's the job that here we have to do. We have to find the cluster and cluster between similar data points. Now the questions is, what kind of similar? Now the big questions, that what is similar? What is similar? That's comes into our mind. So there are various kind of the similarity. That's the definitions of the similarity. It depends on our problem. What is your problem? What is your requirement? And according to the based on our requirement, we will define this similarity. Now we will see these things as we progressed in our this series. So just don't be confused. Just try to understand the concept behind this. Then as we progressed, then we will learn what kind of similarity we have used in our different model, in our different situations. That thing we will learn. But now in this lecture, just try to understand the main concept behind this clustering technique. Now let's try to discuss this thing through an example. Suppose let's take we have some data set like that. Now just plot this data set first. First task. Suppose let's take just plot. If we plot this, if we just take suppose using some algorithm, some program, we will plot this data set. Suppose let's take we have f1 and f2, and now we will plot this data set. Suppose let's take we will plot this data set like we will use the scatter plot. Suppose let's say we will use the scatter plot. If we such kind of data set, we can easily plot this kind of thing. Easily plot. This is possible only using this value. This is possible. If it is one dimensional, then this data is lie on a single line. If this data is two dimensional, this lie on a this kind of pictures. If it's three dimensional, this lie on a single cube, like that. It is possible. It is possible to plot this kind of scatter plot. Okay, we can easily do this job. But the question, the task here is we have to group the cluster between similar point. Now if you just showing it these pictures for a 5-year-old kid, if you asked this thing for a 5-year-old kid, find the group of points between these pictures, they can easily separate, they can easily doing this job. Sure, this is a group of similar point, this is a group of similar point, now this is a group of similar point. Okay, if you asked these questions for a 5-year-old kid, okay, so this is the group of similar points. It will be better if you just write this. Ask to find group of points. Okay, then we got this type. Then we got this type of pictures. This type of pictures. Okay. Now the questions, how we will find this group of pictures is like that. So if we ask these questions for a 5-year-old kid, they will easily find this. This is a group, this is a group, this is a group. But just ask these questions in which basis they will find this answer. Let's try to understand. So the first answer that's come into our mind, the first answer that come into our mind, first answer is, first answer it will be the points in a cluster that are close together. The first answer that we got means the closed point. We just say these things, this point, this point, these points are closed together and make a group, or it make a cluster. First answer we got the points in a cluster are closed together. Okay. Now the second question is how we will find these are the two clusters. This is, so here we will find how much. Suppose let's denote it will be better. Suppose let's take it's the cluster 1. Suppose let's take it's the cluster 2. Suppose let's take it's the cluster 3. Okay, cluster 6. So there have 3 clusters. There are three clusters that we have seen easily. Just ask a simple cheat, they can easily. So there are three clusters and these are the clusters. Now the second questions that come into our mind, how we'll find there are three clusters? Okay, how we'll find this answer? So the answer that we got from here, so the points in different cluster are far away. Just see this. These points are making one cluster, these points are making another cluster, these points are making different cluster, another cluster. So to different, just if you just compare the cluster points between cluster 1 and cluster 2, means there have some differences, bigger differences, bigger differences, bigger differences. So the second answer that we call points in different cluster are far away. Points in different cluster are far away. Okay, means here if you just try to find this answer here, so the similar concept, the similar that we have used to group the cluster or points, similar concept here we are got here, means closed point, close together. The things that gives us the closed together points. Yeah, in these examples the closed points are give the concept of similarity, gives the concept of similar. So as we progress, you will see there are various kind of similarity definition, but try to just try to clear the concept first in this lecture. So here the concept of similarity here is means closed point, that's group together, that we call similar point. Okay, that's kind of thing. Okay, the similar that we got means close together, and these things are the similar, that things are problem specific. It depends on our problem, it depends on our situation. These things are problem specific. These things are problem specifics. As we progress, as we discuss various kind of problem in our algorithm, then it will be better to better understand. Okay, but just that in the starting lecture, just try to understand, means similar means closed point that we make a group, that's the thing. So if we just compare and conclude this lecture side by side, means what are the difference of classifications or regressions and cluster, means what are the difference between the supervised learning model and unsupervised learning model. Then we got this answer. Then we got the main difference here we have for unsupervised learning. For supervised learning model, we have the data set D that have this kind of data points xi and yi, but here the data point that we have d dashed, here only we have dxi data points, there have no yi's. The first reference is here, there have no yi's. This is the first difference for supervised and unsupervised. This is for supervised learning model. And this is for unsupervised learning. This is for unsupervised learning. This is the first difference. This is the first difference. Means difference. First difference. Now the second difference is that for classifications, regressions, the problem to justify the answer, how much correct our problem is, they have various techniques. For classification, if you remember, for classification or regression, there we got various technique. So such kind of AUC matrix we have read the precision matrix, we have read the recall matrix, we have read the R square matrix. This kind of thing we have to find the accuracy of our model. That we have. But here in the clustering technique, clustering technique, there have also various kind of technique. The first concept on the clustering technique that we are learn in this series of lectures, the first technique we are going to learn means their technique is k-means algorithm. Okay, in detail we will learn this thing in detail, step by step, in detail. Everything, every algorithm, what is the mathematics behind it, in detail we will learn. The second that we are learn the concept of hierarchical clustering technique. Hierarchical clustering. Hierarchical clustering. These things also we will learn in detail in example, detail with example. In details we will learn these things. Now the third that we are going to learn, the DB scan. DB scan technique. Mainly these three clustering techniques are mostly used in the real world data. This is the main very popular clustering technique. And the clustering technique are mainly based on the problem specific. This is the mostly used clustering technique in general. In typically the engineers are used. Also we have learned this DB scan technique in details. Okay, there are very type of clustering technique and based on problem specific, what problem actually we have. Okay, but in typically we have these three technique are mostly used. Means in these three technique we will learn these three technique in detail. Okay, after learning these things, we will discuss some problem, and based on the problem we will learn and what kind of means how the clustering technique are built on the basis of this kind of problems. Okay, just we will learn these things. I think the main idea how the clustering techniques are work actually, what the behind the main concept of it, I think you will got some idea from this lecture, and how these things are different from the reclassifications and regression technique. Already we have completed these various kind of classifications and regression techniques. Now in this series we will going to complete the various kind of unsupervised learning models, means clustering technique, various type of thing we will going to learn. Okay, as time progressed we will learn these things. Just be bear with me, just be patient with me, just please stay tuned with me. And if you like our content, if you like these contents are give some knowledge of your of the world of machine learning, if you got some knowledge from this lecture, please like it and share these videos those who have actually needed this kind of. Okay, so we will see in next video for k-means algorithm, to start the k-means. Okay.